Hello and welcome to today's Office Hours presentation. This is your host, Paul Hoyt. Our Office Hours presentation is a relaxed, informal mentoring program for our tribe members that we hold every Monday at noon Pacific time. All the recording slides and exercises are archived in our members area. The reason we do these is because we know that being a successful small business owner can be a great experience, but we know that it's tough, and sometimes it's really tough. And we want you to get to know us because when you get to know us, you'll know that first and most importantly, we really do care about you and we want you to be successful in every area of life, whatever that means to you. We want you to find the greatness, the happiness, the divinity within yourself, and then remember it, embrace it, and live it every single day as we try to do. Our passion is helping entrepreneurs and small business owners get clear, stay focused, so they can grow faster. And we usually relate the subject matter of the day to one or more of the key performance areas of success that I defined in my 2004 book, The Foundation Factor. And today it's all about leadership. We're going to be talking a lot about leadership. In fact, we're talking about accountability and other leadership virtues and how being a person of honor and integrity and the other things we're going to talk about, can actually increase the revenues and the profits of your company. We also relate the subject matter of the day to one or more of the cells in the matrix formed by the three areas of growth: business growth, professional growth, and personal growth, and levels of performance of mindset, methods, and momentum. And today we're going to talk about all of them. We're going to talk about all 9 of them and relate the subject matter of the day back to performance of your business in all of these areas. So today we're going to talk a little bit about leadership virtues. We actually have, I think it's 13 of them that we're going to talk about. Then we're going to go into open Q&A and coaching, where we have an opportunity to talk with each other quite a bit. And then I'm going to repeat a special offer that I've made for the last couple of weeks at the end of the presentation. So let's talk about leadership virtues. What does it mean to be a virtuous leader? Somebody who I think is admirable and somebody who leads their team by examples. Like I said, we have 13 of them that we're going to talk about individually, one-on-one, and here they are. The first one's accountability, then responsibility, transparency, honesty, integrity, reliability, and vulnerability, humility, empathy, kindness, decisiveness, honorability, and last, respectability. So let's jump in and talk about what does it mean to be an accountable person? What does it mean to have accountability? Well, I looked this one up. In fact, I looked up the definitions to all of these different words because I'm a big fan of understanding how other people are using words so that we can use them in such a way that will further our communication. And notice I didn't say use them in a correct way, because I don't believe that. I believe that words are labels on concepts. I think that we all speak different languages, but I do think it really facilitates our communication to agree on what concepts these labels apply to. And so let's talk about accountability. Accountability has as its root the word count. So it means that if we are accountable, that we are willing to be measured and tracked on things. It means we're willing to report to others a progress that we've made and even report to others. And it implies that we have goals and commitments, and it implies a willingness to be judged by others. And let's take a look at that word judged. Judged to me means to be compared and rated. It doesn't mean to be criticized. I know sometimes you'll hear people use the term that says, don't judge me. But what they're really saying is don't criticize me. Or when we talk about don't be judgmental of other people, the implied conversation there is don't be super critical of other people. But a judgment to me can be a very fair thing. I judge the weather to be warmer than 60 degrees. I judge this horse to be stronger than another horse. It can mean a lot of different things. To me, it just means that we compare and we rate. So when we are accountable to others, we have a willingness to be judged by others on our performance. Do you know people who are not accountable? Well, I certainly do. Those people, when we ask them, are you willing to set a goal? Are you willing to be held accountable for a goal? How are you willing to be held accountable for a goal, or are you willing to make a commitment? There are people that just dodge that like crazy because they have a tremendous fear of not being successful. They have a tremendous fear of being criticized by other people. And as a leader, if we allow ourselves to be accountable, we encourage other people to be accountable, and we encourage them to step into their power when we do. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that a little bit later. The second virtue I want to talk about is responsibility. Responsibility means having a duty to respond and perform, instead of giving away your power by blaming others and other circumstances when things don't get done and things don't turn out right. Notice what I said about giving away your power. Somebody who feels absolutely powerless, who has a lot of victim energy, who believes that they don't have, nothing's in their control at all, will not take responsibility because they don't feel like they have any capability. Nothing's ever their fault. Sometimes they claim credit, even though it's inconsistent with the whole nothing's ever my fault. But they feel generally powerless. People who refuse to take responsibility, who blame others for everything and feel like the world's out to get them, have a lot of victim energy and have a lot of prisoner energy. And it's a terrible thing to do, a terrible way to feel, rather. So when we take responsibility and when we encourage other people to take responsibility, to me it is the same thing as saying, I am willing to step into my power, and encouraging other people to step into their power because they have the power to control the outcomes. They have the power to respond appropriately to circumstances. Get them the opportunity to practice resourcefulness and flexibility and resiliency through the virtue of leadership responsibility. Another virtue is transparency. Transparency means that you're hiding nothing. It means that what you see is what you get. It means being direct and open in your communications. And challenging part about that with leadership is that tact and confidentiality are necessary in some situations. Tact being, a kind way of being direct, a gentle way of being direct. When somebody is really messing up, it's taking them to the side and having a conversation privately. It's being transparent in the way that I feel about that and the way that I'm honest about that. And by the way, it takes a lot of personal power and strength to be transparent, just as it takes some awareness of your own personal power whenever you accept responsibility for things. So transparency means that we're direct and honest and open our communication, and it's really a what you see is what you get mentality. It's very similar to honesty. Honesty, of course, means being truthful and fair. And it can also, by the way, there's a couple of different forms of dishonesty. One of them is lying, and the other one is withholding the truth. Yes, and omitting things can also be a form of dishonesty. In fact, we have a term that you'll often hear people use, say passive-aggressive behavior. Passive-aggressive behavior means not doing something that would have helped somebody else out or prevented damage in some way. So we were passive in that we did not take action, and in that lack of action, we damaged or hurt some other person. In the same way, we can have a lack of honesty, being not telling the truth when the truth would have been beneficial, and holding that back. So like transparency, honesty is one of those things that we want to honor, but confidentiality is also important too. So I'm going to give you an example of a time in my life where I think that somebody took that confidentiality maybe a little bit too far. I was working at a company called Ingress. They were an early provider of database software. I was working for them in the early 1990s. And I remember vividly the president of the company standing up in a kind of a town hall meeting, an all hands on deck meeting, and saying that There's been some rumors out there that the company was being sold. That was absolutely not true, that they were not in any conversation with anybody, etc. And the very next day, they announced that the company had been sold. So how did he do that? How was he a leader and honest and transparent? Well, the truth is he was not honest. The truth is he was not transparent. He was not direct and open in his communications. He was not truthful and fair. But he was, by the nature of the job, obligated not to be that way. He was obligated by his board of directors, under strict guidelines, not to talk about any conversations that were underway with suitors who wanted to buy the company. That's a tough one. That's a tough one when you're as a leader and you want to be honest and you want to be transparent, you want to be open and direct, and you want to be fair and truthful, but the situation says that we can't do that because of a higher responsibility that we have to the shareholders of the company or to individuals at the company. So it's always a bit of a dancing game as to how honest are we and how truthful and how transparent we are, knowing that we value the leadership virtues of honesty and transparency. Another one that I think that we can almost always be is in integrity. And integrity means a couple of different things. It means either adhering to moral principles or being complete and whole. When we have an offering that's incomplete integrity, oftentimes it means that it's a total solution or a complete offering, or we're offering our clients in integrity that what we have is going to help you solve your problem and reach your goals. Being out of integrity would be very similar to being dishonest, but it means being lack of wholeness or lack of completion. I love a definition of integrity that I saw just last week that says, doing the right thing even when no one is looking. So when you are a person of great integrity and a person of great respectability, it means that you adhere to your own moral principles, that you're complete and you're whole in the things that you're doing, and we can trust you to do the right thing even when you didn't have to. But you do it because of your adherence and your own personal values when it comes to being a person of honor and being a person of integrity. Reliability means that you're able to be depended upon for accuracy, honesty, and or results. And we all want reliable people on our team. And again, the way that we get reliable people on our team is that we role model reliability. We become a reliable, dependable person. One of my favorite forms of reliability is discipline, especially when it comes to personal self-discipline. Discipline of putting on these office hours presentations, 152 of them. Discipline in terms of posting an energy of the day message, every morning on Facebook for the last 83 days. A long, long time. I learned a long time ago that personal discipline was a way of feeling more powerful. I know that I am in control of my schedule. I know that I'm in control of my own attitudes and emotions and perspective whenever I do something every single morning that requires that level of self-discipline and self-control. And that makes me be a reliable person, or hopefully it helps me being seen as a reliable person. That unless the big earthquake of 2017 happens, that tomorrow morning at some point in time, Paul's going to get up and post something to Facebook on the energy of the day message. I love to be reliable. I love to be seen as reliable, and I hope that you do too. Another virtue I consider to be vulnerability. Vulnerability means that you're able to be damaged, and it also means that you're able to be seen as somebody who is imperfect and capable of being damaged. This is not a leadership virtue that we see in a lot of corporate environments, but it's one that I really have a tremendous amount of respect for. And with its sister virtue, humility. Humility means freedom from arrogance and a willingness to admit and work on our imperfections. You know, it took me a long, long time to become a humble person, to become, to be freely admit to anybody that I was anything less than perfect. The reason, of course, was that I was insecure, that I was frightened, that I felt relatively powerless. And it was my arrogance and my ego was a way to protect myself. You know, I defended myself a lot. You know, you should like me because I'm smart. You should like me because I'm strong and capable and creative, because I can do a good job. And I had not learned the lesson of humility yet. But thank goodness, thank God that I was able to learn that, you know, probably only 8 or 9 years ago. It took me a long, long time. That was a tough one. But humility is extremely valuable, you know, to be able to admit your perfections, to love yourself despite your imperfections, to work on yourself every single day, you know, requires that level of humility. An arrogant person has a hard time really working on themselves because it's really tough to see into your subconscious mind and see the challenges that still remain when you're trying to defend your own arrogance. Really tough. I think that humility is a fantastic leadership virtue, like vulnerability and like the other ones that we've talked about so far. Another one I really like is empathy. Empathy means understanding and sharing the feelings of others. It means really that I do know how you feel because I've been there a lot of times, or I can imagine how you feel. And it implies to me a certain kind of caring for another person, a willingness to, not, if not walk in their shoes, at least understand what it feels like to walk in their shoes and understand their circumstances and act accordingly. And as a leader, I hope that act accordingly, you know, has some measure of kindness to it, which means friendliness and generosity and being considerate of others' opinions and others' circumstances. Another leadership virtue is decisiveness. You know, we talked about the soft skills there in terms of, vulnerability, humility, and kindness, but there's also a leadership virtue of decisiveness. And decisiveness means that we make decisions quickly and effectively. And honorability means being honest and fair and having integrity in all of our beliefs and actions, being worthy of being honored by other people for the character that we have, in addition to being worthy of being honored by the accomplishments that we helped manage. Honorability means that we achieve great things, and oftentimes through great personal sacrifice. We honor someone's contributions. We honor other people's sacrifice. We honor people's achievement because we consider them a person worthy of such honor and respect. And the last one on the list today is respect. Respectability means having a sense of worth or excellence, and it means having great personal qualities and abilities. We respect somebody else when we see somebody else, when we acknowledge them, and when we see the situation that they are in with some level of empathy. And we are respected whenever we're a person of honor and a person of integrity and a person of transparency and honesty and responsibility and reliability, all of these 13 leadership virtues that we just talked about. So these are, by the way, these are only 13 of them. You know, I started out with a list of 8 or 9, and when I sent out the email on Friday, I had some emails come back to me about other leadership virtues that people had seen, and that's why I added them to the list. And there are dozens and dozens of others. I have a list of 205 different virtues that I look at periodically that I used to have memorized. All of these are on that list, and there are many, many others on that list as well. So, you know, I encourage you to think about other leadership virtues that you might think are important to being a great leader for yourself and important in the leaders that you mentor and guide as well. But the question is, you know, why are these important? Why do we even care about those? And here's the biggest reason, and that is that the people that you work with, they want to feel safe. They want to see you as somebody that they know, and hopefully somebody that is generous and kind and friendly, and somebody who admits that they have imperfections and is working on those imperfections and is encouraging and supporting the people around them on working on their imperfections too. It helps them feel safe in their environment. They want to be able to trust others. They want to be able to be treated fairly. And they want the self-esteem that comes from working around people that grant them self-esteem. The bottom line is they really want to feel empowered. They want to feel powerful themselves. And feeling in a situation where they are honored and they are respected and they are encouraged and supported and treated kindly and treated fairly, is really what people want. I would say even more than money for most people. So the next question is, how do we grow these qualities in other people? Well, first and foremost is we work on them ourselves. We have these qualities ourselves to the very best of our ability, and we become a great role model. We expect the best out of others, and we reward other people who exhibit these particular leadership qualities, these leadership virtues, and we hold them accountable. Let's talk about that, holding people accountable for a minute, because this entire conversation was spawned by a conversation I was having with a gentleman in one of the men's groups that I am in. And he said one of the ways that he likes to hold people accountable is not by asking them, did you get that done? But rather by saying, how was it completing that task? Or how was it when you completed that task? Or how was it when you got that done? Making the assumption that they did get it done, and then allowing them to be honest about whether or not they actually got it done. But assuming the best, as opposed to, did you get it done, is really kind of a criticism. It's I don't trust you to have gotten it done. So I really appreciated that, and that's what spawned this entire conversation. We hold other people accountable, as I said earlier, because it helps them step into their power. When we say, I believe you, I believe that you can meet this commitment. I believe that so much so that I'm going to ask you how it went the next time that we meet. I'm going to hold you accountable because you have expressed a willingness to be counted upon, a willingness to be measured, a willingness to have goals. And then when we hold people accountable, it helps them step into their power because they know that somebody else is trusting them. Which, by the way, brings up one of my favorite questions whenever you ask somebody if they're willing to be accounted for this. And that is, what are you willing to be trusted with? What level of responsibility, what level of performance are you willing to be trusted with? And get them to state their own goals and get them to make their commitments, and then encourage them and support them and motivate them and cheer them on and pat them on the back, and reward them whenever they make them. In other words, holding them accountable is really a way that we mentor them and help them step into their power. So how do we grow ourselves? How do we grow these leadership virtues within ourselves? It starts with self-awareness, which is the first of the 4 cornerstones of emotional intelligence, which are, by the way, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. The cornerstone to all of personal growth is self-awareness. And then we have a willingness to hold ourselves accountable, a willingness to measure our own performance. How did I do yesterday? Did I get angry yesterday? Did I get upset yesterday? What tagged and triggered me yesterday? Every morning for the last 9 years, I've asked myself those questions. These days, I ask myself about 100 questions every morning. Did I blame somebody else for anything? Did I feel ashamed? Did I get angry at anybody? Did I speak out, in anger? Was I unjustly judgmental of other people, etc.? I hold myself accountable to a very high standard, and I encourage you to do exactly the same thing. to wake up every single morning and check in with yourself on how did yesterday go, or before you go to bed at night. Look and review the day and have some self-reflection there on how did you do, what tagged you, what triggered you, if you got angry, what made you angry, etc. Holding yourself accountable and with self-awareness is the key to growing these leadership virtues and all those other virtues in yourself. Getting an accountability partner really helps. I've had multiple coaches, every day for the last, I guess, 10 or 12 years of people who would say, what are you going to commit to accomplishing over the next week or the next month? And then will check in with me and give me an opportunity to report to them, to be measured, to be counted, to be held accountable. Because it really does help because we all have this addiction to being accepted by others, this addiction to approval by others. And having accountability, an accountability partner in our life, allows us to leverage that strong sense of wanting to be seen and admired and respected by others into something that can spur us into taking action when times get tough. When times get tough, when we get tired, when we get fatigued, we can think, wait a minute, I got a coaching call tomorrow and they're going to ask me how I did, and I want to be seen as a person worthy of respect. So I'm going to take the extra time and I'm going to work the extra hour, go the extra mile and get the job done. And how do we grow all this stuff within ourselves? Practice. For those of you who know me, you know that I write books on the practice of awakening. Well, we can practice leadership virtues as well. We practice being responsible. We practice being accountable. We practice being transparent, honest, vulnerable, and a person of great integrity. Practice, practice, practice can make excellent. So far, it has not made perfect in my life, but it certainly has made excellence, and it can in your lives too. I talked earlier about the Awakened CEO system. With the Awakened CEO system, hopefully you've seen me talk about the mindset of business growth. The mindset of business growth says that my business will grow faster if I am seen to be a leader with great virtues. If I'm seen to be a virtuous leader, if I am vulnerable, if I am honorable, if I am humble, if I take responsibility, if I am willing to be held accountable to things, then I know that I will be a great role model. And by being a great role model, I will encourage other people to step into their power and to step up and show up in different ways. And we're going to have better teamwork, etc. That's my belief. That's my strong belief based on 50 years of business experience, that when we show up at our best, that we encourage other people to show up their best as well. And that means we'll have a much better working environment, and that working environment can translate into greater revenues and profits. Part of professional growth means that we are willingness to be held accountable for learning new skills and tasks. And we've talked a lot about personal growth in the last 30 or 40 minutes, and about how being a great accountable leader and having great leadership virtues requires personal growth. And this is, of course, the revelation that I had several years ago when I created the Awakened CEO system, that business growth, professional growth, and personal growth were all very, very related. That, sometimes we had to learn to do new things. We had to grow professionally in order to grow our business. And sometimes we have to overcome internal blocks and challenges and grow personally in order to grow professionally, in order to grow the business. We talked about methods, about holding ourselves accountable, about developing greater leadership virtues within ourselves and within others in the areas of business growth, professional growth, and personal growth. And I really encourage you to get into momentum in each one of these areas. If you don't have an accountability partner, find an accountability partner. There are, I am sure, many of your friends and colleagues that would be willing to be an accountability partner and have that to be a reciprocal arrangement at no charge to either one of you. All it takes, is the willingness to be accountable and the willingness to be vulnerable and the willingness to have those conversations. I love to have those conversations. So my encouragement to you is to get an accountability partner. And maybe that means hiring a professional coach. If it does, then by all means do that. But in every area of your business and in every area of your life, seek to be a person of accountability, integrity, responsibility, and all of those other 13 virtues and the other, 200 virtues that I've got defined otherwise, and get into momentum today, right now, today, after this call. Give somebody else a call and say, I know that I could perform at a higher level if I made my top 3 to 5 goals every single week, and I know that I am committed to that. And would you help me be a person of commitment by holding me accountable? It is a great, great practice and one I strongly recommend. There are several different related office hours. Number one is the future of management, which I may come back and do again because I really enjoyed doing that. And it's been like well over 2 years since I gave a presentation on the future of management. Another one is 103 on how to be a great leader. Office hours 119 on conscious business leadership. Office hours 129 on being an awakened CEO, and office hours 135 on taking complete responsibility. With that, I think I'm going to open it up to questions and answers here after I take a sip of my beverage, and we'll talk about things that you want to talk about relative to leadership virtues in just a second. If you have any questions, by all means type them into the chat log and we'll call on you and give you an opportunity to talk a little bit. If not, I have a few other things and some email questions and discussion topics that came in after we announced this subject. So number one, one of the things that I hated about working at a big company was the lack of humility and vulnerability in the executives. And how do you get a company culture to change? Well, company culture to change, first of all, requires that somebody wants the company culture to change other than you. It requires that the executives of the company realize that there are some aspects about their company culture which are counterproductive. And by the way, an example of a counterproductive company culture is when they're over-competitive and they're not very collaborative. And there's a lot of blaming and shaming going on. And people are unwilling to take responsibility. Because when people spend a lot of their energy always trying to defend themselves and to deflect criticism and blame other people for the crap that's going on, they're not spending their energy actually getting the job done. So a collaborative environment, where people are working together in a spirit of mutual trust and respect, is far, far more productive. But it takes the executives of the company to recognize that. They have to realize that I think we got a problem here. I think we're burning a few too many cycles, with people defending themselves and blaming and shaming people all the time. So how do we get companies like that to change? I would say that I'm not an expert in that level of organizational development. So I'm going to give you, just a few tips, but there are companies that you can hire that the entire focus of their company is on organizational development at a very large company level. Most of the people I work with are with very small companies, anywhere from 1 to 50 to 100 companies, where the role model of the company, the CEO of the company, and the top 2 or 3 people at the company can have a dramatic and an immediate impact on the performance of the company by exhibiting these leadership virtues and by role modeling these virtues. Larger companies, it can take a multi-$100,000 multi-year effort by a variety of outside consulting firms to come in and help transform a company culture for very, very large companies. But for those of us who work for small companies, it's much easier than that. All we have to do is decide that we're going to be a person of virtuous qualities and reward other people when we see them exhibiting those virtuous qualities, and very quickly people will get the idea that at our company we value honesty. At our company we value vulnerability. We value taking responsibility. We value accountability, etc. So with small companies, I like to say that small companies can turn on a dime, and they really can. Larger companies they're more like oil tankers than speedboats, and they just don't turn very quickly at all, and it takes a very concentrated effort to do that. So thanks for that write-in question. I appreciate it. And hang on just a second. This same person had a follow-up bonus question for 10 points, and that was, another thing I didn't like about working at a very large company was there's quarterly goals and objectives, and the whole did exceed, exceeded expectations, met expectations, did not meet expectations, etc., that they forced us to put everybody into those categories. Why do they do that stuff was the question. And the follow-up question was, is there something better that I can use at my own company? Large companies have a real hard challenge with a lot of people at those companies who are just phoning it in. They're showing up, they're not giving it their best at all, and they try to encourage people and motivate people to be better performers through things like rating systems. And believe me, when I worked in large companies, I've seen some very onerous rating systems. For example, you had to rate all of your people on a scale of 1 to 10, or if you had 7 people, you had to say, this person's first, this person's second, this person's third, this person's fourth, this person's whatever. You had to rank people within your department based on some arbitrary guidelines. The fear, of course, being that the person who's ranked least on that scale, on that rating period, is open to getting let go if the company has a reduction in force. And that's what they were trying to get people to do. They were trying to get people to, ahead of time, be thinking about who you need to let go, because at any point in time, we might have a 10 or a 15 or a 20% reduction in force, in the manufacturing plant and in the front offices too. So you have to be ready for that as a manager, as a team leader. It's a tough situation to be in, especially if you pride yourself on everybody on my team is an A player. Some may be an A minus and some may be an A plus, but I don't tolerate people on my team. I don't hire people or keep people who aren't A players and really carrying their own weight. And we're already running lean and thin. It can be a pain in the ass when executives comes down and say, you have to cut people on your team, whether you think that they're great or not. So those ranking systems can be proactive into getting you to think about that. And by the way, when you think about that, there's a lot of managers and leaders out there that don't really hold other people accountable, that don't really give honest, transparent feedback, and are not open and direct in their communications. And they don't take a mentorship attitude. And it's okay with them if people just show up and phone it in. Not you and me, of course, because you're listening to this presentation, but in management positions in a lot of large companies, they let the people who work for them and with them get away with a whole bunch of crap. And in companies like that, they have to have some sort of mandated way in which to evaluate other people. And of course, it always is troublesome, in your quarterly reviews that so many companies have. It's always troublesome to think about, I perform at an A+ level. You've come to expect me to perform at an A+ level. I can't possibly exceed your expectations because your expectations are already so high of me because of the job that I've been doing for the last 5 years. It gets a little bit twisted and a little bit crazy at times. But, having worked at the large companies and having had conversations with the HR people at very large companies, it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to encourage people other than having quarterly goals and objectives and letting people know that they're going to be rated on those quarterly goals and objectives? How do we make better managers, out of the managers that we have? And I think, by the way, if you listen to the office hours on the future of management and the ones on emotional intelligence, you could get some more tips and techniques about that. But the better stuff to use at your own company. is, honest one-on-one conversations, to have that mentoring attitude, to when that person knows that that you really do care about them, you care about their career, that you want them to perform at higher and higher levels so that they can have a better career, so they can make more money for themselves and for their family. It means a tremendous amount. And I'm a big fan of a collaborative management style where people don't work for you, they work with you, and you listen to them, even though that you may be the one who has to make the final decision. But it is kind of a democratic and collaborative approach to running the business where everybody has their say. And yes, there is a better way of managing companies, and that's the way that I recommend that you think about running your company. I got a comment and a question here from Michael, who's on the call with me today. In leadership, saying what you're going to do happens quicker than allowing others to watch you are doing. I'm a little confused on that. What is your recommendation when standing on the balcony and leading a team? Which do you lead with, or which carries more strength? I think that that's right. Michael, I'm going to take you off mute and invite you to clarify that just a little bit for me. Are you there?
Yes, I'm thinking that a lot of times you're in a situation and you're working with a team and you're trying to decide, do I just tell them what to do, or do I just go ahead and start the process and let them watch you do it to get some momentum? And I think in a leadership position, both of them carry weight, but you can only start with one type of direction, if you will. Do you just tell the team, hey, do this because I'm the leader, or do you say this is, or do you just actually start the process and get some momentum going and let the team follow along?
I think there's another alternative there, and thank you very much for the question. I really appreciate that. I think the alternative is to spend 30 minutes or an hour, asking them of their opinions, of saying, hey, here's what we need to do. For example, we need to improve customer service. I'd really like to get your ideas on ways that we can do that, and let's discuss it for 30 minutes or an hour, and then we start the process. Then we make the decision and go for it. So I do think that there's the opportunity for collaboration, but I do think that some situations are right to say, I woke up this morning, I had an epiphany, and here's what we're going to do. And you do it with, a light heart, if possible, a little spring in your step, a little joyfulness. If people realize that by doing what you are requesting of them or requiring of them, that, it will bring them into greater favor, and, that it can be a cheerful thing, I think that you can give those kinds of directions. But by far my favorite thing to do is to invite other people to collaborate. Is to say, what do you think that we should do? And here's what I'm thinking, and let's create these plans together, then let's go execute these plans together. So I do think that being a great role model is really important. You have to do that before, during, and after every decision that's being made. And I do think that collaboration is important, and I think sometimes, just saying, okay, I thought this through and here's the way we're going to do it, is also extremely important. So I would say all of the above. Try all of the above. But I'm a big fan of collaboration, because when you invite other people to discuss the plans that you have and create those plans with you, then first of all, two things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to get a better plan, because, as I like to say, God doesn't give all the great ideas to just you or to just me. Anybody can come up with a fantastic idea, and unless we invite them to share those ideas with them, we're never going to have the benefit of those ideas. So you get a better plan when you invite people to create the plan with you, because they're going to have ideas that you're not possibly going to have. And secondly, you're going to get their buy-in, because they helped create the plan. It's not your plan, it's our plan. We created this plan, and I agreed to help execute this plan, and they feel part of the team. So that's the reason I really love collaboration. But thank you very much for that comment. I really do appreciate it. Let me take just a second and do a brief word from our sponsor here. Our next office hours presentation is going to be on February 20th next week. We're going to have more live group coaching, but I'm not sure what the theme is going to be. If you have some ideas, please send me an email or go to paulsurvey.com and take the survey. We are still continuing our offer on our No BS Business Growth Package. Now, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I've started a Facebook marketing campaign, advertising campaign around the No BS Business Growth Package. It is 4 90-minute consulting sessions, the Business Clarity Questionnaire, the Phase Growth Strategy, the Business Foundation Profile, and the 90-day growth plan. And some of you who are listening on the call today have been through this process with me in the past. The normal price for this is $1,500, but that's not what you're going to pay because we have all kinds of bonuses and discounts available depending on who you are. The system comes with a 100% money-back guarantee, and if you don't want to continue after we complete the first session, we'll give you a complete refund. And if you don't agree that the package was worth every penny that you spent for it, you get to set the price. That's right, a complete money-back guarantee. And if we get through the entire thing and say, Paul, I don't think it was worth the price that we agreed on to start off with, then you're completely off the hook. You get to tell me what you thought the value of it was and why, and we'll make it right with you. So call right now to schedule your free strategy session and learn about discounts and bonuses that may apply to you. I'm in the mood to give some pretty good discounts right now, so give me a call if you're interested in this No BS Business Growth Package, 4 90-minute consulting session with yours truly. Now let's come back to open Q&A here. If you got any other questions or topics of discussion or just comments, please type them into the chat box and we'll call on you. Otherwise, I'm going to go back to some of the other questions that I had via email. Here's a good one. I don't like pushing on others. Do I have to drive my people hard in order to be a good leader? And I'm going to say that you do need to push a little, that you need to encourage, that you do need to drive a little bit in the sense of saying, this is the direction we're going to go. Let's push down the accelerator and make it happen. I think it's really beneficial to have stretch goals, to say, all right, here's our minimum goal. Here's the minimum acceptable goal for this month, but I want you to shoot towards achieving this stretch goal. Minimum is $10,000 of revenue this month, but our stretch goal is 12.5. Come on, let's go make it happen. So drive people in the sense of a lot of positive energy towards a stretch goal, I think is extremely beneficial. When you're not willing to drive your team, it could mean that you have a lack of self-esteem and self-worth yourself, that you're afraid of being judged as a leader, that you're afraid of being criticized because, oh, I couldn't possibly drive somebody because, what if we don't make it? What if they don't like me? Don't be a person who fails to encourage and support other people and yourself out of fear of not being liked or judged. If you've got people on your team that you are afraid of on your team, then I encourage you to change your team or step out of that management role, because you can't manage successfully from a place of fear. You have to manage from a place of confidence and self-respect and self-esteem. If you're afraid of people on your team thinking poorly of you, then by all means, get a personal coach, get a counselor, get a therapist, dig into that, because that's a personal growth issue that is blocking you and keeping you from having the success that you could have out of fear of being judged by other people. By all means, give me a call if there's anything I can do to support you. And as a coach, sometimes we can, because coaches are all about seeing the positive in other people and thinking about the future. Counselors and therapists, may be more suited to helping you through severe issues with insecurity that some people have by addressing childhood issues, which we as coaches are not qualified to really help you with. So find one of the others, make sure you get somebody on your team that can help you step into being a confident leader, step into saying, asking people for their thoughts and opinions, but being decisive and saying, all right, this is what we're going to do, and go after it with a great deal of positive energy and enthusiasm, a willingness to be held accountable because you know that you're going to be successful and you know that you're going to make those goals, that you are determined to be that way. Perhaps related to that is somebody wrote in a little thing the other day. I can't help but think about today's current political environment when we talk about leadership virtues. And many politicians, have very few, if any, of these leadership virtues. And why is that? Very tough question. Why do politicians, people in power, have a tendency to act out of integrity, to not be vulnerable? And I would say, first of all, that not everybody as a politician is that way at all. There are politicians that I admire and I respect because they are people of great integrity, and they are people who take responsibility, and they are people who see the best in other ones. I think they're too few and too far between. It seems like being decisive and being even a bully in today's political environment is seen as being something worthy of respect. But I've never been that way. I've never, just so you'll know, I've never really voted for the party. I've always voted for the person. I've always thought that we would be best led in our country and in other organizations by leaders who were confident, by leaders who were conscious, by leaders who had a mentoring approach, who saw the mantle of leadership as a responsibility and as an honor, and had a real servant leader attitude. But all too few politicians today see that. And I think that is because the old adage that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That when people get into power, it becomes very, very addicting. Their self-esteem, their sense of self-worth, have all to do with being re-elected and being seen as a person of power by other people, as opposed to people whose sense of self-worth and self-respect comes from being a conscious or kind or loving person. The path of power is a tough, tough path to walk. And I do think that it becomes very, very addicting when you start to see your own sense of self-worth in whether or not you can get elected or whether or not you can get to be the chairman of a particular committee, or what the press thinks of you and says about you. Is a very, very tough position. That's a tough road to walk. I think it's rare that politicians are able to walk that road, and really maintain a sense of equanimity and integrity. I'm thinking Gandhi, I'm thinking the Dalai Lama, I'm thinking Martin Luther King, and in today's environment, Bernie Sanders is a person that I admire as being a person of integrity and respect. His policies, I may not always agree with them, but at least I admire the man. I admire the man, Barack Obama. I don't pay too much attention to the policies as much as I do that, because it's really difficult. Keep that in mind as you grow more and more powerful in your own company, how difficult it can be, in some environments, to be seen as a person who is vulnerable, to be seen as a person who has humility. It can be very, very hard. In big company environments, you've probably heard me say this before, they can be extremely competitive. People are always competing for that next promotion. There's 8 of us on this team and only one of us is going to get promoted. And I need it for it to be me. So I'm going to do things I can to improve my competitive position. I'm going to show up, but I'm also going to, drop little landmines for other people. I'm going to be a little bit critical of other people. And I'm going to try to demonstrate to people that I'm the better choice for the promotion. And I'm the better choice for enhanced budget or increased budget next year because I did so well with this budget, and being critical of other people. It is a dangerous, dangerous game. And that's why I really like principles like holacracy, and I really like, future management styles, ones that are more collaborative, where the leader is not appointed from above, but is voted into leadership by the group. I love that as a principle. and how people can come together and decide who should be the CEO and decide who should be the leader. We take a look at Whole Foods, Gore Technologies, and Google in some respects, and we see a future of management that I think holds a tremendous amount of promise. And for those of you who've been on this call today, I can't help but be very grateful for the people in my life who believe in being a person of virtue, who believe in being a person of honor and respect and accountability, who believe in taking responsibility, who believe in helping others to be the best person that they can be, who like to collaborate with other people for a variety of different reasons. I feel honored and I'm extremely grateful for those of you who have shown up for the call today. One last question, which is a tough one, and then we'll call it good for today. How do you tell when it's time to be transparent, and how do you tell when it's time to be honest and when it's time to hold back? And I don't know that there's a really good answer to that, because I'm a big believer in situation ethics. Like that leader that I talked about earlier in the call, who lied to our faces about the company being sold because he was obligated to do so by his board of directors. Was he a person of honor and integrity? It certainly didn't seem that way from my perspective, but from the perspective of the board of directors and the perspective of the shareholders, was he being in integrity with his agreements with them? I think perhaps he was. But so from my perspective, he wasn't. From their perspective, he was. I'm a big fan of situational ethics. And so I would have to say that the most important measuring stick is, are you acting, with love in your heart? Are you acting in kindness to other people? Are you acting in a way that's consistent with your agreements with other people, if those agreements are in conflict with the implied agreements that you have with even other people on your team? If you do whatever you do with love in your heart and compassion in your heart and a sense of peacefulness and lightheartedness in your heart, if you're in your highest vibration when you decide to do what it is that you decide to do, you can't go wrong. So get there, stay there, be a person of high consciousness, be a person of high vibration, make all of your decisions, all of your actions and attitudes coming from that place, and you can't go wrong. You may learn some things, you're going to trip and fall sometimes, you're going to make an occasional mistake like I do, but you gave it your best. And at the end of the day, you'll always be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I gave it a great shot. I was completely in integrity with myself, and I really did do everything I could to act from a place of love and compassion, honor, and respect for other people. And I honor you and I respect you in everything that you can do. And if there's any way that I can support you in achieving your business goals and dreams or your personal growth goals and dreams, please don't hesitate to give me a call. And until we talk again the next time, this is Paul Hoyt wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Bye-bye.